Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H event space. Today, you are tuned in to Leica Stories. We are in conversation with the man, the myth, the legend, Jay Cassario. Jay, welcome.
What's up, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, man. It's been a while. I figured we had you on a while back, and it's like every time we have you on, it's like we make you do a presentation, we make you do a workshop, we put you through the ringer doing work. Let's get you on and just have a conversation and talk.
I love it, man. I love it. Love it.
It's easy. We get inside your head a little bit, we get behind the process. So,
And it's 3 o'clock. I just woke up about an hour ago, so you let me sleep in today. I appreciate that, man.
we got you firing all cylinders then, no excuses.
No excuses, baby. No
He's
excuses.
he's pumped up, he's ready. I'm
I
gonna
am,
kick it
man.
off. I got a bunch of softball questions for you too, so I'm going easy on you today. I'm not putting you
All
through
right.
the ringer.
All right. I like it. I like it.
Awesome. Nah, man, but look, wonderful work. There's a lot to you. I think there's a lot of admirable characteristics that you bring to the table. But I want to start with something nice and easy. What's the origin story? How did you get into photography? What inspired you? When did the journey begin?
So for me, Derek, I think I've told you this before, man. I was born a photographer. Ever since I came out of the womb, man, I had a camera in my hands. Always wanted to be a photographer. No, not at all. That's not at all the case. So the short version of it is I was an engineer out of college. I did the corporate world for a solid 15, almost 16 years. I sat in a cubicle, looked out to a parking lot all day long. One of my offices had no windows for a few years. So it took its toll. It was that lifestyle that you always, when you're a kid, you're like, you picture yourself growing up. This is what I'm going to do for a living. And I would just sit in this cubicle and be like, this is not what I had imagined. Like, where did I go wrong? What am I doing here? So I didn't get into photography until I was 32 when I bought my first camera. So yeah, it's a little different than, some of everybody's story is different, but I got into it a little bit later than most of, my friends that are in the industry. Um, One of the reasons, or like you said, the origin to that was I grew up in a very artistic household. My mother was an artist. My father, he was an engineer. That's how I got into engineering. But my mother was also a wedding photographer. So I grew up with that in my house. I grew up knowing everything about wedding photography. My mom would let me tag along. I'd carry cameras for her. And back then it was all film. So, when she had got into her first digital camera, I was a teenager. And I remember, just being technical. I was still into all that stuff, but I wasn't into cameras. But I remember would, all right, you got to help me figure this out. Like, I don't know how to do this. Like, how do I edit these pictures? Like, let's sit down. So I remember I learned how to use Lightroom and Photoshop before I ever picked up a camera because I was helping her with her own clients. And then, I went to college for art. I got a full ride to the Philadelphia University of Arts. I turned it down. It was one of those things where I did it my whole life. It was just drilled into me from a child. Art, art, art. It was, I was always painting and drawing, and I didn't have an iPad to play on all day. So my parents would just throw me sticks and rocks and tell me to go make stuff. And that stuck with me. That's my soul. I still draw. Me and my son, and we have drawing competitions almost, especially now that summer he's off. We'll sit up late at night and have drawing competitions. We'll make stuff out of clay. He's really into that. So, that's my soul. That's where the origin comes from. And then when I turned 30, I was on a family vacation for New Year's Eve, and my mom suddenly passed away. It was a shock. It was unexpected, and it rocked my world. It taught me a lot. It was one of those things where you quickly learn, how short life is. And it was a wake up call. It was one of those wake up calls where it was like, I'm not happy with my life. Seeing my mom pass away unexpectedly in the same room that I was in. I gave her CPR trying to resuscitate her. It was a nightmare, but it was one of those things where it was like, this can happen to me an hour from now. This can happen to me tomorrow. Like, I'm wasting my time away in this cubicle in a career that I just didn't, my heart wasn't in it. Uh, so oddly enough, I got a call from a past client of hers, a wedding client of my mom's. Now, my mom had been passed away for a year at this point. I'm still grieving. I'm still trying to get through the whole process of how to live without her. And I get the question of, hey, your mother shot my wedding. I'm looking for somebody to photograph my daughters. I don't have much money. I wanted to check to see if you maybe knew how to use a camera. And I was like, I don't. I've helped her. I've used it. It's not that hard. I'm sure I can figure it out. In a couple of weeks. When's the wedding? And she was like, in a few months. Long story short, I told her I would do it for free. So me and my wife both, I was like, hey, you got to come with me. You got
Wow.
to back me up. Like, put a camera in your hand. We'll figure this out together. And it was a small, like, backyard wedding. But at the end of the day, it was like there was something about it that I just was like, not only did it bring back the memories of my mom, but it was this whole new world to me that I could express like my artistic everything I've done my whole life getting up to this point. I'm like, this is something I can use my artistic ability to, now there's a possibility. In my head, I was like, I could turn this into a business. I know I can do it. I was 31 or 32 at the time, and I'm like, I should have the knowledge from working in the corporate world, being in the industry as long as I have been. I'm going to give this a shot. So I talked my wife into it, and within a year, we were booking 20, 30 weddings, a year. And
Wow.
up within 2 years, our prices had tripled, and it just snowballed. And next thing you know, here we had a multi-photographer studio, and we were building our second studio, and it all had within 5 years, I'd left my job. And yeah, it's a crazy story. Um, it's one of those things I never saw coming. I never would have anticipated it. It wasn't anything I planned growing up to be a photographer. Um, and the irony to it is that my mom never got to see any of this.
Mm.
So my mom never got to see that I even picked up a camera, let alone, ended up doing the same thing that she did, and then took it to this whole other level to where we have, photographers that work for us. We travel the world. She just did weddings, maybe 10, 15 a year. She just really enjoyed it. She loved it. So yeah, it is. I mean, I know she sees it, but it is kind of ironic that I ended up following in her footsteps, which was something I never wanted to do when I was younger. To now, she's looking down at this studio that me and my wife built, and yeah, I know it makes her proud. So it's a pretty unique origin story for me.
That's awesome, man, I got chills over here. I mean, that's awesome, and it's great to hear just so much passion, and everything that you just described is the right reasons for people doing it. It's funny, I was gonna ask you why wedding photography, because it's 50 mixed bag, some people jump in, it's like, "Hey, I wanna do this, I wanna do fashion, I wanna do portraiture," and then you
Right,
have
right.
it's a rare blend of people that are able to do weddings, 'cause I've never understood it, it's like me, it's like I did a couple weddings and I'm like, "Okay, that's enough for me." Like, it's a big day. I don't like the weight on my shoulders. I didn't really
Yeah, yeah.
enjoy it. Do you think that passion was always there, or was it something that, happened when your mother passed away and taking on, it's like, I think we as humans, we don't realize that family connection sometimes, and we kind of take it for granted. And that's
No, we
one of the
do.
things that makes photography so powerful, is that you never realize the power of an image until somebody passes away and that's all you have, as an image or a video. And you really start to realize the importance of the photo. Is that something that, do you think, was always there in you? I mean, your mother had to, you're around it. You're working, you're becoming your own person. You might not realize it, but
I don't think it was always there. The artistic side of it was always there.
mhm,
As far as the weddings and becoming a wedding photographer, eh, that just kind of happened naturally on its own, which is, it's crazy to think about it, that that's how I ended up in the wedding industry, was because a past client of my mom's, who she had already passed away, just randomly reached out to me. Had never reached out to me, I don't know if I would have ever, I don't know if you and me would be talking right now, put it that way.
yeah, that's
That's
wild.
what, that was kind of what triggered everything. I got this phone call. I got asked if I could do a wedding because they didn't have the money to pay for a wedding photographer. And initially, obviously, I was like, I can't do this. I'm not, there's, the pressure of a wedding. I don't want to mess this up, even though I'm doing it for free. It was just something, it was a new world. I had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't sitting back and making portraitures on a, on a stencil sheet of paper while people are dancing around. Like they wanted me to actually photograph the wedding. So I literally just dove in and took 3 months and just tried to get as much as I could, know as much as I could, learn as much as I could about cameras. I used my mom's camera that she had when she passed, which was, I think, a Canon, I don't even know, man. Like it was a Canon Rebel XTI or something.
Mhm.
Not even full frame, but it did the job. And I think what that wedding did for me was they loved the pictures at the end, even though, looking back now, what I did was I think what made them stand out was I just focused on capturing moments. I'm like, I'm just gonna sit back and kind of just capture things as they happen because I remembered that's what my mom did. So I did that. I posed them a little bit, but I didn't know anything about posing at the time. So at the end of the day, when they were happy with their pictures, it was like I did something I didn't think I was going to be able to do. But at the same time, I was also able to use my artistic, you know, abilities and everything I've put my life into that I didn't want to put into engineering. Now I have this new outlet that I could just see if I can put some time and if I can have a few things fall into place, I can make a career out of it. And yeah, I took a huge chance. Convincing my wife was a big part of it, obviously.
Was she ever into photography like that, or was it kinda just she's along for the ride?
I taught her how to use a camera when
Wow.
I started learning, and she she'll admit it, she's never been as passionate about it as I am. She
Mhm.
wasn't an artist growing up, she's always been she's a social person. She has her degree in social work. She's more like, but so that aspect of the weddings is what she likes. She likes the social aspect of it. She does all the sales calls, all the timeline calls. She's more of the face of the business because that's where she shines, man. I fumble through my words, and I'm not a salesman whatsoever. So, thankfully,
Same.
it's been the two of us, man, and we've been able to work on this together, build it up together, and yeah,
So you guys are still going strong as a duo.
we are, man, we are,
That's
and
awesome.
it's funny, man. Every wedding we get asked the question like, "How do you guys work together as husband and wife?" And we don't ever shy away to say like it was a rough first few years, man. It was brutal. I mean, there was many nights after weddings where I slept on the couch, or I mean, man, I think one night I slept in the truck because I was so mad. I just put my seat back and just passed out. Came back in the morning because it was, learning how to work with this, your wife, your significant other at something that neither one of you are good at, and you're still learning. But each of you think you know something that you
Yeah.
really don't know.
And it's high stress to begin with,
It's
like,
high
you're
stress, you got clients looking at your bride and, because you're also, you play the role of like a wedding planner a lot of times. You're trying
right.
to get people to go here, get there, and make sure everybody's on time. And when you're new at it, it's like, well, it's much easier for me to blame her than it is that it's my fault. And it was so we would literally just be like looking across the room at each other, just like pointing at each other, screaming, you know, giving each other the bird, and it's just like, all right, this is ugly. We got to figure this out, and we do, man. We're like a well-oiled machine now. I don't think we've gotten an argument at a wedding in probably 6 or 7 years.
That's awesome. What how
Yeah,
long did it take for the passion to start to come through? Like, I mean, because 'cause it's gotta be something it's you clearly have that you have the entrepreneurial spirit, right? A lot of people don't have it. I don't have it. I'll admit it. I don't have it. I like, knowing that I'm getting a regular paycheck coming. I don't wanna have to chase jobs and chase my money. Wouldn't it have been just as easy to like, "Hey, this isn't working out. Let me move on to something else." What made you stick it out?
dude. I'll be honest with you. With the way the wedding industry is going right now.
Mhm.
I mean, and I'm not going to sugarcoat anything at all. I'm still pushing forward, and battling through this because it's ups and downs in this
Mm.
industry. You have these years where we're killing it. We shot over 130 weddings one year as a studio,
Wow.
and then COVID hit, and then we had a slow year. Then this year that took off, and we shot another 100 weddings. But lately, it's been slow again, and it makes it's I have the entrepreneurial like mindset. I have that drive. I want to see this business and studio continue to grow and grow. My wife, on the other hand, and you know, admittedly, she doesn't have that same mindset. That's not for everybody, just like you said.
Mhm.
She's more along the lines of, hey, you know what? Maybe it'd just be easier if I went back and, you know, used my degree and, you know, while we're slow, picked up a job as social working again. And, you know, for me, it's like, you know, I'm not going back to engineering. I will fight tooth and nail. I don't care what I have to do. I am not going back. I'm going to make this work. And I think that's what drives me, is that I know the alternative. I remember, and it's like it's ingrained in my head what it was like sitting in that cubicle with 7 different bosses, with their bosses, and corporate world. It just drove, you know, it just took all the life out of me. And to anytime it's slow, if we have a week where we don't get any inquiries or we don't book a wedding, you know, just naturally with her, the way her mind works, she gets nervous. And with me, I'm like, all right, I got to get more marketing, and I got to hit social media harder. I got to do this. You know, I got to make phone calls. I got to run over to venues, make sure they're pushing our work, because I know I do not want to go back ever to the corporate life that I had.
Man, these conversations never get old because I think even for someone like me, it's like after a certain point, I can hear this same dynamic and talk to a bunch of people who have the entrepreneurial spirit over and over and over and over, and it won't move the needle until one time you just crack. And I think that's what's so important about having these conversations, because I'm sure that half the people, if not more, that are out here and that are going to be watching this interview are the same type, where they're like, yeah, but I don't have what it takes to just jump off into the unknown, or yeah, maybe next year, or and you keep
Yeah,
putting
no,
it off and keep putting it off, and it's like eventually it's like you got to choose your sanity and your own personal well-being over anything else at that point. I mean, what's
yeah,
living life if you're just soulless?
yep, yep. And I know you can understand where I'm coming from with this. When I was doing both, so when I was an engineer, thankfully I was a manager. So I had a team, you know, I put my time in. Um, I wasn't so much doing engineering itself anymore. I was managing a team, which allowed me to edit weddings.
That bridge.
As long as my team was getting their work done, I was able to work on Twisted Oak stuff. And I would do that for hours. So I was like, well, you know, crap, I could just ride this out as long as I can. Like, why do I don't have to leave? But then we had my son, and I was putting 45 hours a week into the engineering job. And then even though I was working, you know, getting some editing done, I'd still have to come home and, you know, we would have to run the business. And then I would be gone on weekends. So I'd work Monday through Friday, then shoot weddings on weekends. And I had a newborn that I was barely seeing. And it was just like that was the breaking point. And I know you
That
know what that's
catalyst.
like, man. It was just too
Totally.
much. And I had to make a choice. And it made it easier for me because it wasn't as much of a juggling act. It was, I had this side over here where I wasn't seeing my son, and I'm working 2 jobs with the idea that one would eventually go away and I would jump ship and take that leap of faith. But I remember coming home from a wedding, and it was like, you know, I think my son was over my in-laws, and he was sleeping. And I rushed home from this wedding to try to catch him. I think he was 2 years old at the time. And I was like, you know, keep him up, keep him up. I want to see him, just even if it's just for a few minutes. And I walked in the door and he was passed out cold. And I just sat there and stared at him. And I'm like, oh my God, I can't do this no more. Like I
Mm.
have to. So it was that moment. I was just like, it's it. I'm going in Monday, 2 weeks. I don't care what I have to do. And to be honest with you, I wasn't ready. Like I didn't have everything. I didn't have all the cards in place yet to make that leap. But I just said, hell with it. I can't. I have to do this. I can't delay it no more. You know, I'm not. My son hasn't been seeing me. I need to see him, and it's just this is what I planned, and something needs to change. So, yeah, man, that's what made me make the jump, and I haven't looked back.
It's like a daily feeling of desperation, dude. It resonates so much because it's like, man, it could be one single day. It's like, I know I'm gonna see him in the morning. You know,
Yeah,
it's like there's times my wife will be like, "Go out, you need a break." I'm like,
yeah.
"No, no, I'll skip going and working out tonight because it's like by the time I get home, he'll be sleeping." She's like, "Well, you'll see him in the morning." I'm like, "No, but like, no, I need to see him
No,
like
I
right."
know, I
It's like a
know.
level of like desperation where
Yeah,
it
dude.
totally resonates how you gotta just that's it. I'm pulling the plug right now.
Yeah.
I
And I
gotta
remember
make
my wife looking at me, and it was kind of the same thing. Like like, don't jump the gun. Like, I know you wanted to see him tonight, but just don't jump the gun. We don't have enough money, like, put aside, like, for this. I made good money with my job, and I was going to take a huge pay cut, but it was at that point, man, I didn't care. I was willing to take a shot. I had sat there and talked to people who were like, yeah, it's a risk, but if you really want to become an entrepreneur and you have that mindset and that drive, you have to just do it. You're going to delay it for years. And it was that moment, man. I still remember exactly where I was standing, where my son was sleeping. I mean, it's like it was yesterday. And it was just like, nope, this is it, man. I can't do this no more.
What was the biggest support? Is it, a support system? Was it your wife? Was it some characteristic that you possess? What was the biggest thing that got you through? Because it's easy to say, well, you can save up your money and you could do this, you could do that. Everybody needs something to get them through that initial, get over the hump. What was it for you that really got you through the toughest period of the transition?
It was my wife and my son, without a doubt. Uh, I didn't have a huge support system early on. When this industry can be tough, man, especially for those starting out. There's not a ton of people, especially 10 years ago. It's changed, it's changed now. It's a little bit better
Mhm.
now, but I remember reaching out to wedding photographers, local wedding photographers, asking them, "Hey, like, can you mind if I tag along and second shoot?" And I remember them saying, "No, like, you don't have any experience. We only use our own in-house second shooters." So that was another thing. I never second shot ever. To this day,
Oh,
I've only second shot once, and that was for a friend who needed who was in a jam and needed somebody.
like a bailout.
Yeah, so I didn't have that where I learned and somebody trained me. It was, and I look at it like I didn't pick up any bad habits from another photographer. That's the way I look at it. I never second shot. I just went out and I just did what I felt wedding photography should be and what I felt how I wanted to do it, how I wanted to work with clients, how I wanted the images to look, the brand I wanted to build. That all came from just this is what I think it should, this is the way I think it should be. I didn't have anybody that was like coaching me. And it's funny now because some of those photographers that I reached out to that first year, I'm good friends with now. And I bust their balls all the time. It's like, you guys shunned me early on, and now it's like you're attending my workshops. You want to do workshops with me. Some of them have moved on. They're not photographers anymore, but it was tough in the beginning. Um, and even my own family, the idea that I was leaving this job, this engineering job that I had, spent 15 years working my way up the corporate ladder. My father was
What the
the
hell are you
biggest one.
doing?
What are you doing? You're making a huge mistake, man. Don't just please don't do this. And it was like, it was just, I was able to block him out. I still to this day, we don't really talk about it. He still looks at it like, oh, you're gonna end up back in corporate. You're gonna do it. I know it. I'm like, I'm 45 years old. If I end up going back to corporate at that age, I made a big
You
mistake,
got
man.
bigger problems.
Something went really wrong. But yeah, man, it was honestly, it was my wife and having my son and the way I envisioned and the way I wanted my family to be raised and the life I wanted to raise my son in. And the biggest blessing of it all was that my wife had my back. This was my idea at first, and I was pushing her and I wanted her to leave her job so that we could both build the studio up. So then she did. She left her job. And so now we both left our full-time careers to take on this leap of faith into this, photography thing. And it worked out, and I couldn't be more grateful to her for pushing me, because if I didn't have her, if I was single, or if I had a wife that was completely against it or took like had the same mindset as my father, I probably would be back in engineering.
Mm. Yeah, you definitely need that support system. Now, I want to move to industry wide. I mean, we know the wedding industry it's interesting in and of itself, and for those on the inside, probably even more so because all the nuances and all the stuff that goes on in between. But it's changed a lot, and it's like I think we've become like a clickbait society of like, well, I'm going to show you how to make your stuff stand out, and look at me, and my stuff is better. And it's like it gets just lost in the bog. It's saturated. Every market is saturated now. It's great because there's a lot more creatives, and I think it's has birthed a lot of people that wouldn't normally have picked up a camera. But now they've made it so easy to where it's like, hey, I mean, look how you started, dude. It's like you're a
Yeah.
creative individual, right? You're a creative individual. So okay, I can pick it up. I don't have to paint something from scratch. I just have to see well, learn how
Mhm.
to use this tool, and then I can take it from there, which I think is awesome. Now we're at a place where, okay, social media has saturated it some more. Is the idea of standing out even so important anymore? Like, I feel like we all attend the same workshops. We look up to the same people. We're all just recycling the same ideas. At the end of the day, there's not much originality. And when you do experience originality, a lot of times it's just it's someone just trying to be different, and it all ends up being like a some sideshow act that doesn't stay around. It's very trendy. What is the secret to longevity? I mean, you've been able to navigate various fields. I feel like when you do something, you go into it full blast, you're ready, you take on whatever you need to be successful. What's the secret to longevity and success?
The w the it's a tough one, man, and I agree with you for 100%. Everything you just said, I couldn't agree with more. I think for me, the idea I had early on and the brand that I built, the way that I shot, the way that I composed my photos from an artistic mindset to where, I when I especially when I first started out, everything that I learned in art college or in high school and when in my early, even as a kid, everything is composition in art. When you're painting or you're drawing, everything's composition. So, picking up a camera and learning the technical side of it, that took me some time, but it was all the other things that most people would struggle with once they get past the technical side of things. It's the composition, it's the, you know, coming up with a look that's unique. Well, I already
Mhm.
had that in mind. I already knew how to edit before I picked up a camera. It was, I lucked out. Those things worked to my advantage. And I think what helped me in the long run, especially during those periods where the industry gets shaky, when COVID hit, my main goal was to just stay consistent, not to change anything up. I wanted to push my brand, push the editing style that to me I feel like stands out. People recognize it. I wanted to just continue to push it and make sure that I was consistent every wedding, every engagement shoot. Even, if I was doing headshots for like, corporate headshots, I made sure that I showed as much as I could, but it was the consistency that showed, all right, I'm not going to stray from what I want my work to look like. Um, and if that wasn't for every client, and it seemed like at the time there was years where the clients that my work resonated with was getting less and less. And those were the moments where I would start to panic. Do I need to change
Interesting.
it? Should I switch it up and go like light and airy with my editing and like jump on that bandwagon? And it's like, no, 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 just stay true. I just forced myself to just stay true to who I was, man. And like you said, everybody's, attending the same workshops. Everything's been done. And you're fooling yourself if you think that that's not the case, because it is. I could, every time I think I come up with something, it's been done 100 times before. That's why I think one of the biggest, uh, joys I get out of wedding photography is that they're all different. Everything's different. So it kind of takes that away from it. I'm not the one drawing the picture or composing everything. I'm basically, and I think this is where I get the joy out of it. I'm documenting these moments that are happening organically while trying to make it an artistic piece with the composition or how my camera's set up or what lenses I'm using or if what I'm using in my foreground. But those are the images that I take the most pride in, the ones that I'm just capturing what's happening in front of me, but putting my own twist on it from everything I've learned through life. And I'm putting my own, my soul into that photograph. And it's nothing that, you know, I couldn't teach that in a workshop to where here, this is how I took this photo. I'll never take that photo again. It's not going to happen that way. And I think that's where I find the most joy in wedding photography is that it's always different. I'm always pushing myself to, even, you go to venues that are the same. You shoot at these venues 10, 20 times a year, and I tell my clients, like, my goal is to make it so your wedding looks like nothing like any other wedding I've ever shot at this venue. And,
Love
and I'll
that.
ask them, like, is this, if there are photos that I've taken that you like, then, oh yeah, I'm all for that. I'll take them too. But my goal is to make it like this wedding is its own unique wedding. It doesn't look like any other wedding I've shot here. And I think that's what seems to resonate the most with clients. And I love that that's kind of what I've also put out there for them to, as a marketing tool.
I love that. It's like a blend of I'm gonna stay who I am. I'm not gonna jump on every bandwagon that passes through town, but at the same time, I'm gonna constantly challenge myself to push the creative boundaries. I'm going to use what I know as an artist to let's see how we can make this different. Let's see how we can take this individual set of circumstances. It's like you said, I never thought about wedding photography, as so different. It's like I always just lumped it in. It's like, okay, they're all the same. The couples look different. Yeah, you got a little bit here and there, but it's like, yeah, really it's the vibe of the day is different. There's always different energy. I think some of the stuff that
Yes.
probably scares me probably excites you because it's like, okay, well, there might be a little chaos today. Then you might have a crazy aunt over here. You might have, things might not go well. And it's like, that's the kind of stuff that I think adds to, okay, well, I got to step it up now. I got to maybe how can I use this to my advantage? Do you thrive off the excitement of the day?
Yeah, I do. And I work right now, the past few years, I, I, I do. I work really well under pressure. And but that didn't happen by accident. The first, I'd say 5, 6 years, when things started to go wrong, I would panic, and I don't want to steal this line off. I don't remember what photographer said this, but I heard another photographer say, like, we're troubleshooters. And, as an engineer, that's basically everything I did was troubleshooting. But it was
Mm.
like I can't remember who it was, but they said, we're basically troubleshooters. We have to figure out the answer to all these problems that arise throughout a wedding day while still capturing it and being artistic and still, doing our job. And early on, so long story short, I used to always think that panic attacks are made up. I thought people made these things up. I thought it was just an excuse.
It's a convenient
Like,
excuse. That's
it
it.
was just a way to get out of a situation. And I was doing a wedding and it everything was going wrong. It was raining. The bride and groom were arguing. And there was so much that was out of my control that I couldn't ring back in. And the next thing I know, I'm on my back, and there's these two girls that were working at the venue putting ice on my head. Here I'd passed out. And I don't think I've ever even told this story in an interview. I passed out. My wife is now, Sandy's now shooting the portraits, and they drug me behind a shed so that nobody can see me. And giving me bottles of water to drink. And I had no idea what happened. And then it was, the owner of the venue came up and he's like, "Sir, I think you had a panic attack." And I'm like, "Don't tell me that. They're not real. I didn't have a panic attack." And he's like, "You had a
Unicorns.
panic." So yeah, man. So I had, for a while, there was a lot of anxiety, and I started to get nervous. Like, oh my God, I can't have that happen again. Like, that's so unprofessional that your photographer's getting drugged behind a shed, getting ice packs put on him because
Anybody know how to work this camera?
yeah. Well, I remembered. So after I came to, and I'm like, my wife Sandy, she hands me a camera real quick. She's like, "You got to help me. Come on, pull it together."
Oh,
And I swear to God, dude, I looked at that camera. It was like looking at like something written in Egyptian. I was holding like
looking
just some
around.
tool. I literally am like, I don't know what to do with this thing right now. I can't help you.
You
So
shut
she,
down.
I literally just, my brain just stopped working. But long story short, I reached out to a few photographers who had been into it longer than me. It was actually Erica and Lanny Mann. I reached out to them and I said, "Hey, you guys have been doing this longer than me. How are you guys with anxiety and dealing with that throughout the day?" And they're like, "We've been doing this for 10, 15 years, whatever it was at the time." And they're like, "We still get like that." And I think that made me feel at ease because I thought, why am I still getting anxiety 5, 6 years into this, to the point where it's so extreme that I had a panic attack? I need to get this under control. And I honestly thought that nobody else experienced that. And I remember Eric had said to me, the day that I don't feel that is the day that I think I'll give this up. And it really hit home with me that, all right, this is natural. Like, these nerves are natural. This is a big day for these clients. Of course, if I'm not nervous or if I have any anxiety, then I feel like I'm not doing
Mhm.
my job to its fullest, if you know what I mean. So I ended up, she sent me a book that I read. You may have read it too. It's The Art of War, or
Mm.
War of Art. I read that, dude. That helped me so much. I couldn't even. It's been years now, but now through different exercises and different techniques of that I've talked to different people, dude, I love it now. I thrive on chaos. Some of my best work now comes from when just nothing is going right and just all hell's breaking loose. I have no control over any of it, but I know how to just handle what I can control, let the rest handle itself, and just do my job, sit back, capture everything that's going on, and just let it ride, man. And it's crazy to think how drastically it's changed. But yeah, man, I love the chaos.
You went from ice water over your head to ice water in your face.
Yeah,
Success
man,
story.
you ain't kidding. Yeah,
Yeah,
I actually
before yeah,
I
go
forgot
ahead.
all about it. God.
That's great. Now, before we get into some images, I want to talk about your transition, how you found the Leica system, what brought you to Leica. I feel like, look, if everybody knows the reputation on Leicas, why aren't more wedding photographers using them? I feel like it's kind of that camera that's like somebody gets the gateway camera in, and it's like, okay, I have my system that I built up. Let me
Yeah.
just sneak a Leica in, and then I start seeing on Facebook wedding groups, piece by piece gear starts going for sale as they start acquiring more Leica, and everything else is getting sold off. What's the recipe, man? What are we missing out on as using Leica for weddings?
Oh man, for me, it's I don't even know how to explain it, man. It's the easiest way to explain it is, for me, at the time when I tried my first Leica camera, it was somebody lended it to me, that one of these companies, they loaned out gear. They were like, "Hey, we have this new Leica rangefinder. If you want to try it for a couple months, go ahead." And my wife was pregnant at the time, and I was like, "Yeah, I'll try it out." I had no idea how to focus with it, with like a rangefinder. I had to Google it on my. We're on our way to vacation. I'm Googling how to focus on a rangefinder camera. Meanwhile, in my head, I'm like, this camera is like 10 grand. I'm never gonna buy it. I don't know why I borrowed it. But at the same time, Sony had just released their A7 II, and I was shooting Canon. So I'm like, you know what? Sony seems like they're taking off. They got this new A7 II. It's awesome. So I had that, and they sent me a D4, a Nikon D4. So I had all these new cameras, right? And it was an M9. So it was an old Leica rangefinder. Within a day of using it, put it this way, for a week, the Nikon D4 never left the bag. Sony, I swore to never shoot Sony again because it didn't gel with me. I couldn't, there was buttons everywhere and knobs and too much customization. And with the Leica, there was two or three buttons on it. I found the focusing with the rangefinder, where you have the ghosting. Anybody who knows how to use, focus with the rangefinder will understand what I mean. I found that it just clicked with me. I loved it. It made shooting so much more fun for me again. And it was almost like, I would pick up a Sony and it was like, this camera just doesn't get in my way. It just works. I don't have to try to figure out what buttons to push or what did I customize this button. And yeah, I do. I still, I shoot cameras now where everything's customized. And it was the simplicity of it. Uh, I knew I could just pick this camera up. I could make changes on it without having to turn it on. I can make an ISO change because of the knobs. It's built like an old camera. And that's what drew me in. So then when they came out with the SL2 with their mirrorless camera, it was all right, maybe I could transition and use these for weddings because this has the same, stripped down, some simple body style to where it just does the job. It doesn't get in my way. I'm not hitting things by accident. I'm not hitting knobs by accident. I mean, still just over the weekend, I'm not going to say what camera it was, but I must have knocked the aperture at least 10 times. Where here I'm
Mhm.
think I'm shooting wide open and I'm at like f7 because I didn't realize I knocked the, the dial. So it was one of those things. And then it just, the lenses, they had a unique look to them. Um, and yeah, I started shooting the M rangefinders and then the SL, and then the SL2 came out. And yeah, it just fit the way that I shot. I was never big on like setting up flashes everywhere, and having them dial everything on your camera. It was just, I wanted my camera to just do exactly what I wanted it to do. I want to set my aperture, shutter speed, and then I want to shoot. I don't want to have to change things all the time. I want to roll with it. I want my camera to just do its job. And that's what sold me on it, man. The images were incredible. It just fit my shooting style and I stuck with it. They, luckily for me, they stumbled on my work on Instagram early on. It was that started shooting the rangefinder, and I signed a contract with them and became a representative for the SL line early on.
Awesome. Well, I'm gonna pull up some images now. It does, it's like as you're saying that, it does when you and you guys will see in a moment, it does, it fits your work. I feel like I look at your work and it's like it has that elegance. It has that just not bells and whistles and strobes all over the place. It's just you being in the moment with the couple. There's just such this feeling of isolation in a sense where it's like it's you and the couple are the only three people on the
So,
face of the planet. And I feel like really, really locked in.
so
Talk us through it, man. I know this is a strong image for you. I know it means a lot to you. So I'll let you take the wheel from here.
So this was an image that I shot at a workshop down in Savannah back in 2020. Uh, both of these, uh, both of these people in the photo are both very talented photographers, actually, but they modeled for us for this workshop. So one of the things when I signed on with Leica to work with them and partner with them was, that in exchange for, camera gear or um, anything else in the contract, basically my responsibility on my side of the contract was to host workshops, do lectures, do photo walks, stuff like we're doing right now. But through all that process, I had a rep that stuck with me the whole time. So, it's been 6 or 7 years now that I've been working with Leica, and I've had the same rep. And I remember the very first talk that I gave was at WPPI, and I remember wrapping that up. And that was the very first talk I ever gave for, for photography whatsoever. And it was for Leica. They had just, I just recently signed the contract, but John Kreidler, who ended up becoming my rep, I remember just like it was yesterday, he came up, shook my hand, talked about how much he loved my talk and that he wanted to work with me. Hey, I think we could do some really cool workshops. We could do some really cool stuff. There's not many people right now that, Leica's working with that shoot portraits or weddings. Obviously at the time before the SL, Leica, admittedly, weddings just wasn't an industry that they wanted to tap into. Rangefinders weren't something, there's no autofocus. It wasn't something that they could pitch to the wedding industry and have wedding photographers buying them up. Sure, there are really good wedding photographers who use them. I was one of them, but it's just not an industry for them. Now it is with the SL system, but at the time anyway, John and me got to become really good friends. We traveled the world together. We traveled all across the U.S. A lot of times sharing hotel rooms, eating, going out for meals every night, and then basically planning these workshops together. We would go out to lunch just to plan and get everything nailed down and get our budgets worked out. And sadly, as a lot of you know who are watching this or know, like, know that John passed away. And, just this image to me really represents, uh, you know, every time, all that time that we had spent together. This was one of his favorite images that I shot. And I remember we used it in one of the displays at WPPI the year after this. But yeah, there's a lot of images that I go through from workshops that we did, especially after he passed. I just went through them all. But yeah, this images like this are just really important, man. He was an incredible guy. He touched a lot of people. And I mean, he had my back like nobody else I've worked with in the industry has had my back, and I'm just extremely grateful for him.
Yeah, he's an incredible guy. I just want to hang on and observe a moment of silence for John. I mean, I think everything you said just really nailed down who John was and the impact that he made. So, it's hard to move on for that, Jay. I mean,
Thanks, dude. I appreciate that.
I you know, it's hard to even talk about images. I mean, it's such that's why we do it. I mean, kind of just circling back to your entire story, and it's so much deeper, man. It's so much
It's
deeper. What we do is taking pictures. It's easy to get on and talk about numbers and specs and colors and highlights and composition, but
Yeah. And one thing we haven't touched on in this conversation is the relationships that we make in this industry. I mean, just like you and me, the relationship part of this industry, I think, is what sucked me in the most early on. Even though I had hiccups with trying to work with other photographers who shot me down. Since then, like I said, you get to that point where it was like you find yourself, it's like, well, all my friends are photographers. Like, how the hell did this happen? It's, you build up all these relationships, like the relationships I have with other companies. John was just one of those guys, man, who was as down to earth as you could be. And as real and honest as you can be. And it was one of those relationships that really it it had pushed my career so much further than I would have been able to without him. He was a big driving force for me, and like I said, I'm extremely thankful. And it's we didn't talk about relationships much in this talk, but it's how it is. I mean, even how you and
totally.
me met is pretty comical.
Yeah.
Uh, but we can save that for another time. But yeah, man, relationships are huge. So when you have somebody that you've spent that much time with suddenly, you know, pass away and you lose them, I mean, I've had it happen with my mom. It's you don't ever get used to it. I miss the hell out of him.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point to kind of stick on for a minute is, even looking at how we met, Jay, it was like we met through, mutual people. We have mutual friends, we have mutual industry friends. And it's like I find myself drawn to those that 1 or 2 times a year, even like something like trade shows, man. Going out to Vegas. And it's
No,
not
dude,
about Vegas. It's not about travel. It's not about, hey, I get to go hang out and it's nice weather. And it's about being around people that mean something to me and people who get it. They are in it for the same reasons that I'm in it for. And I think that is so often understated and, you know, kind of going back to my question about, what made you stick it out. It's like you're
yeah,
surrounded by great people who they're going through the same things. It's support network in and of itself, and it's cool to be along for the ride with great people.
it is. Do you can you remember how you and me met at WPPI? Do you remember that?
I remember Von Reeder
Yeah, he was there. But
Steakhouse.
yeah, do you remember what he said though?
I don't remember now. Like,
He, being the smartest that he is, I remember he was like, "Come here, Jay, sit next to me." So I sat down. He was like, "Hey, this is my buddy Derek. He wanted to know if you could help him become an Oberworth ambassador." And I was like, "Yeah, dude, I could do that. I could help you out. I'm an Oberworth ambassador." And I remember you looking at me and then looking at Paul, being like, "Oh my God, why are you doing this, man?" And then I was confused. I'm like, "I don't even know what's going on right now. What are you talking about?"
That's
And then
so Von
Paul,
Reeder.
and he just looks at me and he's like, "He's already an ambassador for Oberworth." And I was like, "All right, well, I didn't know that. Come on." But yeah, I remember that, man.
Oh my god. I was like, there was so many other conversations that were had that night at that table that
That's
I'm
right.
like, where are we going? There's so many moments that still come up from time to time, and it's like, dude, that's it, that's
Yeah.
it. Like, it's
And then I remember at the same conversation, he was like, "Hey, everybody grab their phone and Google Jay Cassario bodybuilding."
oh my
And it was like, "Come on, man. No, don't do this to me." because I don't know
I've been
anybody. I didn't know you, and it was like 12 people at the table.
I've been holding off for 50 minutes, not making any bicep jokes, and here we go.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
I
like
did it. I know I
it's
brought up.
it's inevitable. It's inevitable. It's like that special shout out to Paul Von Rieder. He's a great guy. And you know what that's one of those people. It's like they make being in this industry. And I joke with them all the time about, like even like the wedding side of things. And it's like
Yeah, yeah.
it's so easy. It's like, if I joke, he's got his own hat brand. It's like, man, when am I gonna be sponsored by Von
Yeah.
Rieder hats? When
The
that's the
funniest thing
next
is
thing.
when I know he hates it. He hates it. I bought a Fuji, one of the GFX cameras 2 years ago. And I remember that thing would give me trouble, and I would be at a wedding. I would just start calling him, dude, what's going on with this camera? It gets too hot and it shuts down. Even if it's cold out, this camera doesn't work right. What did you sell me on? And he's like, dude, I don't care. I gotta go.
That's so that's so him. That is so oh my god.
He's like, I didn't make the camera. I don't know what you're telling me for.
That's
Mine works
so
fine.
great.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah. All right,
Oh
man.
man. All right. What are we looking at here? It's a nice little like roundabout transition into this beautiful image here.
So this was this is an older image of mine. I wanted to have you show this one because this is one when I first started to really play around with like lights and shadows in a creative way, trying to find like separation but also still tell a story, have the focus on the bride. But this shot happened almost by accident, to where I was going to pose them and have them up against that wall, and I set her up just to test the light. Meanwhile, as I was standing back, he was completely in the shade that was being cast on him from a big tree. And this was the shot that I took when this was not at all the intentional shot that I had, or the shot that I had in my mind. So, just being able to sit back and observe and just slow down. Yeah, I remember I would just be so fast paced, like, all right, we got 20 minutes to do portraits. Let's just get them done. Like, bang, 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 bang. Let's go over here, go over here. And then it was like, this was the photo to where it was like, if I hadn't slowed down and just sat back and took a look at what was in front of me, I would have missed this photo completely. And ever since then, it was like, I look for this photo, and it's one of those things where it's like, all right, I can't take this photo all the time, but I love being able to show like the contrast of light and shadows. And this was another photo actually that John had up in WPPI. So it was I knew John liked it, liked it, and I was like, all right, I'm on to something here. And it just pushed me artistically to start doing more, because at the time I was using more off-camera flash, and I wanted to try to get away from that, because I felt like when I would have in my head that I can use light any way I want to. I felt like it took away from the way my brain works. I need to have something thrown at me and then make adjustments and try to manipulate it myself, rather than just starting with a blank canvas. Here, I can make light come from any direction I want. I can set up 10 lights and
Mm,
make this look incredible. And there's photographers who do that and they do it amazingly. With me, I like the challenge of doing what I can with the light that's given to me and making an artistic image out of that, while still trying, obviously telling a story for the clients. So yeah, it triggered a whole different mindset of shooting for me with this image.
uh, such a
So
cool shot, man.
this is, I'm sure, I mean, you do the same thing when you travel. You go out and you just like, hey, let's go shoot. I'm somewhere new. You remember what the heck was it called? Mystic seminars. You remember ever hearing about
Mhm.
that?
Yeah, yeah.
So I had never been to a conference. I had never been to a workshop. This was like 3 years into my getting into photography. And I was like, I'm gonna go to this Mystic seminars. I never been to, the Pacific Northwest. So me and another buddy of mine, Douglas Pole is his name. He was like, I'll go with you, man. I've always wanted to go. So we went up to Mystic. Uh, met a lot of cool people there. Some of them are really good friends still that I met on that trip. But on that trip, me and Doug were like, you know what, let's just take a drive out to the middle of nowhere out past like Cannon Beach, all the stuff, all the spots you see on Goonies, and let's just go. We'll shoot each other, rather than getting a model or having bringing somebody else to model. We'll just take pictures of each other. And I'm sure you've done it. I've done it a lot. And we took this hike, man, and I just saw all these trees, how tall they were, and off to the right, it just dropped straight down. And literally, it was Doug was just staring out at looking for looking for something to shoot. And this was just a scene. There's something about this photo, man, that just brings back the memories of this trip, this hike, everything about us, what we did that day, and all the different things we've seen. Um, it's crazy, when you take my career, you take these photos for other people, and we take photos at home, but it's also these photos that we take when we're on the road. That's why I always carry my camera with me, because they bring back such good memories, man. Like, I've never been back since. Seeing this,
Wow.
it's like, oh my God, I want to go back so bad. But yeah, man, this is a photo that I loved how it looked as soon as I saw it, and not even on the camera, just in front of me. I was like, wow, this is incredible.
I love that you threw it in because it's like it's real. It's not just about I'm only a photographer when I'm hired to shoot a wedding. It's like no, it's beyond that. Especially plays in well to who you are. I mean, it's like I'm sure you probably there's times where you're like you got to the grocery store, you drive by the right light, and you're like man, mental note, I gotta come back to this spot on whenever that
Yeah,
hits. So I totally get it.
I do it all the time, man. I did it yesterday. There was a strip of tractor trailers that were empty, and you see how dark they are inside, and then the light hits them. Yeah, it was like you said, man. Your mind's always thinking about what you can capture next. Or
Totally.
so this photo, this was one that the groom was a so this is another one that has a lot of these photos I picked. They have their stories behind them. The photos that are important to me, I mean a lot to me, are the ones that have stories behind them. Whether it's how I took them, the relationships that came out of them, or whatever story that whatever was happening that day. This is one of them. So the groom, he was a cinematographer for feature films like that you see on Prime or Netflix. And I remember to the day he came into my studio on the initial introduction. They hadn't booked us yet. Uh, and I remember he sat back on the couch and he just had this tough guy look, like, I'm this big time cinematographer. I just want to hire a photographer for my wedding and just hope you're decent enough. One of those type of, attitudes. And I remember thinking, I'm like, how the hell am I going to impress this guy? And they hung out for an hour. They laughed, kind of hit it off, had a lot in common. They booked us. I was kind of surprised. I wasn't sure, because they had been looking at other people. So now, fast forward, I think it's 7 years now since I took this photo, and they got married. We're like best friends now. We've worked on a ton of projects together. It's crazy to think about the relationships that we make in this industry and how close they are, and how long lasting they are. But at the wedding itself, he didn't have a videographer. He had told me, he said, not to put any pressure on you, but I'm not going to hire a videographer because I don't want anybody else to do what I do because it'll never live up to my expectations. He's like, so I need you to capture it as best as you can because I'm not having any video. You need to really kill this. And I'm like, all right,
No pressure.
no pressure. And then on top of that, he said, I saw that you like to shoot film for your personal work. How would you feel about if I paid you extra and you shot like half my wedding on film? And I'm like, oh my God, no way. Like I just I was honest. I'm like, I've never shot a wedding on film, man. It's only for personal work. And he was like, just give it a try, give it a shot, man. So on top of the added pressure I shot a lot of his wedding on film, on a Contact 645 and an RZ 67. You know how big those things are.
Yeah.
So I shot those, but at the end of the night, I felt like, I didn't really have anything like really artistic to give him. And I really wanted something to just like wow, like to really wow him and his wife and, remind them like, hey, this is why we hired Jay and Sandy. And there was this sailboat that it was a beach wedding. And, you know, beach weddings, it's cut and dry. There's not, unless it's a really special place, and you're talking New Jersey right now, Jersey shores, there's not much to them. You got a beach, you got some water, and you got some, you know, hotels in the background. So being creative with beach weddings can be tough. Well, this sailboat had washed up on shore at this venue. And, you know, I'm looking at the sailboat during the day and I'm like, I don't know how I can use this. I'm not going to have them climb up in there. And then as it got dark, I'm like, I wonder if I threw some lights on it. So off to the right, I had a couple strobes to light the actual sailboat. And I
Mhm.
tested it out and I'm like, ah, it looks all right. It looks all right. But I'm like, how, where am I going to put them? So then I ended up bringing them out there anyway. And I winged it. I was like, all right, I'm just going to throw a light behind you. And I threw that light on full power. And then everything worked seamlessly. I think I took 3 shots and we called it quits and we went back to the party. But this photo we had blown up onto a metal print that's in their house. Yeah, man, it's just there's such a good story behind this that brings back memories of, you know, how our friendship started, you know, everything about, you know, shooting this wedding and setting this shot up, you know, running around. It was 90 some degrees. I'm sweating. You know, I hated using lights at the time. And now I'm setting up 5, 6 lights to light this sailboat. But it all worked out in the end, man. And yeah, I love this photo.
I love that, and I love the backstories on it where it's, like, not just like, "Oh, hey, the light was here, I wanted to do this." It's like, it really, again, it draws back to what we've been talking about, that connection, the connection to the people that are in
Yeah.
the images, and I think that connection between photographer and couple, especially in wedding photography, especially that is makes it so strong, and it really just ties you. It's like you're tied to a part of something that, for many people, is a lifelong bond, and you're part of it.
And not, and, you know, not to keep bringing John up. It's interesting. So Matt, the groom in this photo, you know, we got to become friends. He started coming out to my workshops to video marketing material for the following workshops. So he got to know John really well to the point where he was working with John on helping with some of the new video features for the SL3 coming that came out recently. So what started off as me just photographing a client's wedding turned into, you know, a friendship for me, but also to the point to where, you know, he got introduced to Leica and ended up working with them on, you know, some of the video features and what he thought about them and their new cameras coming out.
It's funny, talking about features and all of that. One of my first experiences with John was how naive was I? It's like I had never shot a Leica. I'd seen maybe held it a time or two, and it's like going. I'm like looking. I'm like trying to flip the screen out, and I'm like, John, why doesn't the screen flip out? And he's like, because it's a Leica. It is like in that John way. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
so like sardonic. Like,
Yes, yes,
dude, what
yes.
do you expect? It's a Leica. Like, what kind of
Yeah.
toy cameras have you been playing with? So it's just so funny. It was so John, so John.
No, it was, man. There was no, it was, he had a dry sense of humor, which I do, you know, I'm the same way. It's, you know, he would say things and I'm like, man, is he serious or is he joking around?
Yeah, it's like first time I was like walking off like, I think Kreidler hates me. I don't
Yeah.
think
No, you know what? So many people have said that to me, and it's like, and then I'm like, you just got to get to know him, and then they're like, wow, you were right, man. You just got to get to know his personality, and it is. It's like he just he had one of those faces where he looked like he wasn't very approachable, and then as soon as you got to know him, it was like, how the hell did I get that so wrong?
I know.
But he's oh, like once you got him talking, you know, he didn't shut up. So it was like you just got to get to know the guy. And man, he had a heart of gold, dude. And I loved introducing him to people like Matt here in this photo. It was like, hey, this guy does feature films. He's a cinematographer. I guarantee you he can help you with some of your, you know, some of the features coming down the line with your new cameras. And John was like, yeah, let's have it, jumped on calls with him, and yeah, you know, it was really cool just having, you know, everybody work together. And then Matt, the groom in the photo here, he actually he shot my the SL2 promo video for Leica. Uh,
Nice.
I think it was back like 4 years ago, but yeah, so he's been involved with a lot with me. So yeah, man, this
Awesome.
picture has a good story back or story behind it.
Definitely. We'll get to one more image here. I had Jay send me so many images, and I'm like, I should have known we were just gonna be running our mouths the whole time. Wouldn't get to half of them, but
I figured that, man.
I love, dude. This is one of my favorite images of yours.
I'm glad
I,
you
I
picked it.
I'm always partial to this crop. I always love like the more cinematic, the 3x1s and the 16x9s. I love what's going on in each frame here. The architecture. I'm a huge fan of architecture. Talk me through this one.
So it's funny you picked this one because I brought Matt with me, the groom in the last photo. He second shot this wedding with me because it was in Utah and my wife Sandy hates to travel. She doesn't like to fly. So I booked this wedding in Utah and it was the middle of winter and I'm like, man, I need to bring none of the photographers that worked for the studio at the time could make it. So I was like, you know what? Let me Matt he's a photographer on the side for a hobby, he knows how to use a camera. Obviously, I'm like, hey man, you want to second shoot a wedding with me? And I remember he was like, nope, not doing it, dude. Not even gonna, don't ask me again. He's like, I don't want the pressure. And I was like, hey, listen, it's, I'll pay you good money. We'll get to go to Utah. We'll take a couple days extra. We'll get some hiking in, some, exploring. So I talked him into it, long story short. And we had a blast shooting this wedding. They had us come out there for a shoot we shot the whole day before the wedding out in Red Rock Canyon. And then the day of the wedding was at their house. And this is their house. The entire home was designed by the father of the bride, and he designed it by hand, and he's an architect. It was one of the coolest houses I've ever been in. It's so much bigger than what you see here, but he had asked me if I could come up with a cool way to take a family photo that also showed off the house. So I was like, towards the end of the night, me and Matt were kind of tossing ideas around. And I'm like, dude, I really want to get a really cool shot that showed off his house, but has everybody in it. But I didn't want it to be like a traditional, everybody getting a line and, even like a GQ kind of thing. I'm like, let me just see if this will work. So I tossed the idea to Matt, and Matt was like, yeah, let's do it. So we set up a couple lights inside just to brighten things up. So the mother and father are off to the left. They're in the kitchen. I had them. The idea was to have them with wine glasses and cheering each other. Then the bride and groom, and then it's the brother and sister in the next window. And then they had a younger brother who was big into books and reading. So I was like, here, why don't you grab a book and just, this is your normal thing. That's where he normally sat. And I was like,
Awesome.
this is what I had in mind. And it was literally, I took two shots. It was done. This is exactly what I had in mind. This is another one that's blown up in their house. But it was just something that I'm like, how can I make this photo? How can I bring this guy's vision to life and show off this such a uniquely designed home that he made or designed and show off his family at the same time in their big day? And yeah, man, looking at the back of the camera at this one, I was pretty ecstatic.
That is awesome, man. Jay, I'm gonna get my video back on here. There we go. I had a little technical difficulties, but we're back.
So
And Jay, I want to thank you, man. This was awesome. It's always great
appreciate
chopping
it.
it up with you, but it was great to get away from the normal educational fare, and just dive into something a little deeper. Get to know
Nah, man,
you
I'm
as
glad
a
we
as
did
a
it.
person and photographer.
Glad we did it, dude. We did. This was I felt like a lot of topics that needed to be talked about that I think a lot it'll help a lot of other people out right now.
Definitely.
Hopefully, I mean, hopefully somebody can take something away from it. One or two things. Who knows?
Oh, but we got an hour worth of gems here. I do
Did
actually
we
want
did
to
we go
throw
for an
in.
hour?
Yeah,
Oh,
we
we
went
did,
we
man.
went over. I'm gonna sneak in one question here. I know I told you, we don't normally on these interviews take questions, but I think this is a good question. It's relevant. Clinton joined us on YouTube, asking how long did it take to ask for what you felt you were worth? Find that artists have a difficult time with pricing. So, what's your overall? How long did it take for you to be comfortable asking for your worth?
It took a few years, uh, uh, probably more. It was I the so trying to come up with the right answer here because I know I struggled with this for a while, right? I knew I wasn't charging what I thought that I should be charging or what I was worth. Uh, but at the same time, with my business partner, my wife, our minds work differently. Me, I'm like, let's raise our prices. We can easily charge this much. Where she's more, let's just keep things going the way they are. They're going good. Let's not rock the boat. And so it was like, constant back and forth with that. I attended a workshop of Jerry Gionis. It was the very first workshop I ever attended, and there was something he said that resonated with me. And it was such a simple thing that he said. And all he said was he looked out at this crowd. And I mean, I was only like a year or two, that was 2 years in. And it took a few years even for it to really resonate for me to, uh, put it into play. But he had said, who here thinks that they could charge an extra $500 per package and get it, be able to get it? Like the whole room raised their hand. And Jerry was like, well, what's your excuse for not charging an extra $500? And you can literally just see the whole room like, oh shit, yeah, well, I don't really And I was the same way. It was, sure, I felt like I deserved to be making an extra $500 to $1,000 a package. And he was like, if you feel that way, then there's no excuse. Just do it. Stop waiting. And I remember it clicked with me, a couple years later, what he had said. And I just did. We upped our prices, I think almost $1,500 a package.
Wow.
And it was, rather than just little increments, we just jumped it up. And the bookings, they were slow at first. So obviously it was like, all right, maybe we made the wrong decision. And I think it was like we didn't book a wedding for a month. And we had been booking weddings pretty steadily. And I remember my wife just looking at me like, this is your fault. I know we should not have
You
done
did
this.
this.
You did this to us. There's our son. We're not going to be able to feed him tomorrow. So I remember, and then all of a sudden, man, it just we started booking, and we never went back. After COVID, we dropped our prices a little bit, um, and we've kind of stuck around there. We're still more on like the high end, I would say, for our area. Um, but yeah, man, it was a leap of faith, just like leaving my corporate job and doing photography full time. I knew in my heart that I was worth more than what I was charging. And I knew that at the time I had a big enough portfolio, and I had it set myself, my brand aside enough to where I had known it was recognizable. It stood out. I wouldn't say, I never want, I don't think my work stands out that much, but it stood out enough to where I felt that, hey, it's worth a shot. I feel like I'm better than a lot of these other local photographers who charge around the same price. And, I'm just going to take a jump, and we upped the prices and never looked back, man. And it was a good move.
Awesome. Well, Jay, I want to thank you again. Look, we got some good information here, some gems. Dove into the artistic side. Want to thank you. Can't thank you enough, and of course Leica for making a series like this happen. A special shout out to the entire team at Leica for hosting this, and for all of our viewers out there. Thank you guys for tuning in. And if you'd like to see this, the rest of our Leica stories, conversations, and all of our other recorded content that we do here for free and for you on the B&H Event Space platform, just head over to our YouTube, check out B&H Event Space on there, and you can find it. Jay, any closing words?
No, hey, I really appreciate you having me on, man. It's always awesome to catch up. I know you and me don't get to catch up as much as we like to. I try to come up with excuses to head up north your way, but just can't do it, man. I hate driving to New York.
We'll make it happen one day, and
We'll make it happen, dude. But
we'll make
yeah,
it happen
hey,
one day.
I appreciate you having me on, man. And it was awesome chatting, dude.
Likewise, and if you would like me to get you an in with Oberworth, just let me know.
Yeah, appreciate it. Appreciate it. Talk about that later.
Later. Huge thank you to Jay. Huge thank you to Leica and all of our people out there. Thank you guys for tuning in. That is it. Another edition of the B&H Event Space now in the books. Catch y'all next time.